back in 2020, I arrived in Sri Lanka. I was just a fresh graduate out of Australia, and I was looking for jobs. I mean, it was not easy. Um, as soon as I graduated, I realized that I felt I needed to explore a little bit, so I decided to start traveling around Australia. I traveled to Sydney by myself, Melbourne. I just wanted to get lost in my own world and just do what I like, you know. Uh, for a fresh graduate, it wasn't easy finding work. As soon as I graduated, things started to change. None of my plans that I envisioned worked. I had to go through a couple of challenges because life there wasn't easy. You had to work to make your own money. And as soon as I graduated, just a cascade of events started happening. Australia was under fire. The entirety of Australia was just burning. So I remember buying my first N95 mask and reading, so this is used for influenza and this and that. So I was like, what the hell? At that time, the air quality was so bad, I had to buy a mask just to, breathe. And that stopped suddenly, and then a hailstorm hit. It destroyed my entire car. The windscreen, side mirrors, everything was damaged. I was just disappointed because, it's, after bushfires, we didn't have work, we got laid off, and then the hailstorm hit and the car was broken, so I had to fix that. It's just a never-ending continuum of events happening. So towards December, things settled down, and I decided, screw this, I'm going to start working and start, going, traveling, enjoying life. So I started going out, concerts, music festivals, just by myself, and I was enjoying it. And towards March 2020, I decided I should go visit my parents and more to spend some time with my family. But at that time, in March, there's this cricket match that our schools play. So I wanted to go and see it because for the past 5 years, I've not got a chance. So I stopped everything and I just flew. There was a couple of challenges. My flight got cancelled. Apparently, the flight company went bankrupt, so I had to get a new one. Flew in cheap. But as I moved towards the dates I was to depart, news hit. Influenza strain started, ravaging in China, and people were dying, and it was getting locked down, and all these things were very new for us. It was when we have seen, heard certain things about pandemics, but we never heard anything called this like this that could shut down an entire country like China. 4 months later, I remember sitting and waiting for an interview, someone to call me in. I stayed 4 hours outside, and soon I walk in to the interview, and there were several doctors waiting, and then had a chat with me, and next thing I know, that I'm working, and at that time the situation in Sri Lanka was like quite okay. Towards mid-July, where COVID was not a big threat. It was there, but very, very neutral. And the 6 months that went by up to December 2020 was rather okay. It was not as bad as it was supposed to be in Sri Lanka, but everywhere else in the world, people were dying, people were having a hard time. And when we hit 2021, it's where everything started to change. Suddenly, the number of people who are getting sick increased dramatically, uh, and, and soon you saw people dying, and I mean, it was getting chaotic. That's when I was getting into the side of COVID, working the front line, trying to help people who are sick and set up facilities where people could go to and get treated. And um, at one time, I mean, everything was new to me. I never had experience in working, had first-hand experience in working with viruses, but I had to learn because I built a laboratory. Then I had to learn how to do certain things, like um, uh, to run a PCR and detect a virus, how to identify which type of strain. All this technology was new, even though I had an idea when I was at uni what it was, but I didn't have hands-on practical exposure to these. But I learned these new things, and it was such a refreshing thing. I think at the same time very interesting, because when I was in Australia, I never had this opportunity. But when I came down, I had to start my own laboratory, build my own team, and then start working with the team. And then soon we were testing 1,000 patients, 10,000 patients, and now we have tested more than 100,000. So it's a lot of data, and handling all that data was such a big responsibility. At the same time, there were many problems. It's a big learning curve. At the same time, I was fortunate enough to set up a couple of hospitals and convert them into treatment units. And it was such a big experience working with the front line. There was times where I had to get dressed up in PPE and just walk into a room full of COVID patients who were being intubated, and inside the ICU and the HDU, where people were struggling for their life, and running and helping a team set up a unit. And it was so fast. Within a period of 6 months, we were setting up hotels into hospitals and ICU treatment facilities, and a lot of things happened in a very short period of time. See, there are a couple of downsides of this particular job that I got. Don't have any rest. There's no time for family. No time for friends. I mean, that is fine. You have to stay out of meeting people because of the pandemic. But at the same time, there's a lot of things that you lost. There's no mental break. There were times that you felt like leaving everything and just going away because you couldn't just handle it anymore. I mean, there was one point where I was one of the few people in the hospital who got probably the most number of calls. I mean, there was time that nobody could contact me because my line was always busy. There's one call after another. I mean, it was so bad. I mean, sometimes I would miss certain calls, important calls, and after a few months, you contact them and you find out that someone died. Because I couldn't answer my phone call. Probably I could have helped. I remember once getting a call from one of my relatives, and she was crying, saying that her mom was just taken in to the ICU at a government hospital, and she's been restrained. Um, and I soon made some calls, tried to get them down to our place, but it was too late. The mother has been taken in, and she was having a mental breakdown. See, what happens is when you get COVID, there's a lot of things that happens in your body, and one thing is called the cytokine storm. It's where a body produces an immune response. I mean, immune responses are good. It's for to fight off certain the virus. But when the body kicks in override, it forgets what's its purpose, and it starts attacking everything. And you go into a multi-organ failure. At the same time, it cuts off blood supply to your brain. And when it happens, you are in a state where you don't have any access to or control to your emotions, and in a state of delirium where you rip off all your mask and oxygen supply, and people just die of lack of oxygen to your body. At the same time, there were times where I missed certain calls. People died because of lack of information. Wrong decision. Especially people started hoarding oxygen supplies, oxygen tanks, converters, oxygen masks. See, the problem is they store everything at their homes, and they expect when they actually get COVID that they could use it. But when you're in a state of panic, you don't know what you're doing. You need a licensed person to set up these equipment and then supply. What went wrong was people started purchasing all these. Hospitals didn't have enough supply, so hospitals did not have oxygen tanks to supply in the proper manner, where people who didn't know what they were doing purchased it and kept it at home. So I remember one of my friends keeping all these stuff, and his father passed away at home because he didn't know what he was doing. So unfortunately, I missed a call, and a couple of weeks later I hear this news. It was quite sad, when things like this happen to your own friends and family. And at the same time, there's times where I got mobile calls asking for certain drugs, and at that time we were not able to give it to the outside because we ourselves needed it to our own patients. So it was a tough time. There were, certain things were questionable, but you had to work within protocol, couldn't break it, and innocent people needed help, but it was all priority based, who gets what. And seeing certain people pass away, close friends from school, it was very sad. But I think it is by God's grace that I'm, surviving and fighting the good fight. And I think it was a blessing in disguise that I'm in Sri Lanka. I wonder what I would have done if I was in Australia. And I believe I'm working on a higher purpose. I had a better purpose of my life, utilizing my skills and knowledge here to help people and work during a pandemic. I think I am blessed, and also I'm fortunate to work in my own country to serve my own people. There were disappointments, not everything is great, but I am serving a higher purpose.